Have you ever wondered why the same patterns keep showing up in your life despite your best efforts to change? Why you attract the same type of toxic relationships? Why you sabotage your success just when things are going well? Or why you react so intensely to certain people or situations? What if I told you that these aren't coincidences or character flaws, but rather the invisible hand of your rejected parts pulling the strings of your existence? Carl Jung, the revolutionary Swiss psychiatrist who mapped the terrain of the human psyche, discovered something profound about human nature. He found that the aspects of ourselves we deny, reject, or refuse to acknowledge don't simply disappear. Instead, they retreat into the shadows of our unconscious mind, where they continue to operate with tremendous power, secretly orchestrating our choices, relationships, and life circumstances from behind the scenes. Today, you're going to discover the hidden mechanisms by which your rejected parts are controlling your life. We'll explore 5 powerful ways these disowned aspects of yourself are shaping your reality, often in ways that directly contradict your conscious desires and goals. By the end of this journey, you'll understand not only how to recognize when your shadow is running the show, but also how to begin the sacred work of integration that can transform your entire existence. Jung believed that what we resist in ourselves doesn't disappear. It persists, and it persists with a vengeance, manifesting in our external world through projection, compulsive behaviors, and unconscious patterns that seem to have a life of their own. The parts of yourself you've rejected are not your enemies. They are exiled aspects of your wholeness, desperately trying to return home. The first way your rejected parts control your life is through what Jung called projection. Picture this scenario. You're in a meeting at work, and there's that one colleague who absolutely infuriates you. They're arrogant. They always have to be right. They dominate conversations, and they seem completely oblivious to how their behavior affects others. Your blood boils every time they speak. You find yourself thinking about them long after the meeting ends, rehearsing arguments in your head, feeling frustrated and powerless. But here's what Jung would tell you. That colleague is serving as a screen for your own rejected arrogance. The qualities that trigger you most intensely in others are almost always reflections of disowned aspects of yourself. Perhaps as a child, you were told that being assertive was selfish, that speaking up was rude, that confidence was arrogance. So you rejected these qualities in yourself, pushing them into your shadow. But they didn't disappear. They're still there, and now they're being projected onto others. This projection mechanism serves a dual purpose. It keeps you unconscious of your own disowned qualities while simultaneously ensuring that you'll encounter them repeatedly in your external world. Your psyche is trying to show you what you've rejected, but instead of recognizing it as your own, you experience it as something outside yourself that you must fight against or fix. The psychological consequence of this pattern is exhaustion and perpetual conflict. You find yourself repeatedly drawn into battles with people who embody your shadow qualities. You become the victim of your own projections, never realizing that you're fighting with aspects of yourself. The spiritual consequence is even more profound. You remain fragmented, unable to access the full spectrum of your potential because you've declared war on parts of yourself. Think about the people who consistently trigger you. What qualities do they possess that make your skin crawl? Write them down. These are your teachers, showing you the exiled parts of yourself that are demanding integration. When you can see your triggers as mirrors rather than enemies, you begin the journey toward wholeness. The second way your rejected parts control your life is through compulsive attraction to what Jung called the forbidden fruit. This manifests as an irresistible pull toward people, situations, or experiences that embody your shadow qualities. If you've rejected your sexuality, you might find yourself compulsively attracted to highly sexual people or situations, then feel shame and guilt about these attractions. If you've rejected your aggression, You might be drawn to aggressive partners who act out the anger you cannot express. Consider Sarah, a woman who prided herself on being kind, selfless, and agreeable. She had rejected any trace of selfishness in herself, viewing it as morally reprehensible. Yet she found herself repeatedly drawn to narcissistic partners, men who were utterly self-centered and emotionally unavailable. Each relationship followed the same pattern: initial fascination, attempts to fix or save the partner, eventual disappointment and heartbreak, followed by a vow to never date this type of person again. But the pattern repeated because Sarah's own rejected selfishness was unconsciously seeking expression through her choice of partners. Jung understood that we are magnetically drawn to people who carry our shadow projections because our psyche is trying to reunite us with our disowned parts. This isn't conscious. It happens in the depths of the unconscious mind. We think we're choosing partners based on love or compatibility, but often we're being driven by the unconscious need to encounter our rejected selves. The psychological consequence of this pattern is the repetition of dysfunctional relationships and situations. You keep attracting the same type of person or finding yourself in similar problematic circumstances, wondering why your life feels like a broken record. The spiritual consequence is that you remain unconscious of your own completeness, seeking outside yourself what can only be found within. Your attractions and repulsions are a map of your psyche. Pay attention to the types of people and situations you're repeatedly drawn to, especially those that cause you problems. These attractions are not random. They're your shadow calling you home. The third way your rejected parts control your life is through what Jung called the return of the repressed. The qualities you've worked hardest to eliminate from your personality have a way of erupting into your life at the most inconvenient moments, often in exaggerated and destructive forms. This is because repression requires tremendous psychic energy, and eventually the pressure becomes too great to contain. Imagine a man who has rejected his emotional nature, viewing emotions as weakness. He prides himself on being logical, rational, and always in control. For years, he successfully suppresses his feelings, presenting a composed exterior to the world. But the rejected emotions don't disappear. They accumulate pressure in his unconscious like steam in a pressure cooker. Eventually, they explode in ways that shock everyone around him. He might have a complete emotional breakdown, an affair that destroys his marriage, or a rage attack that jeopardizes his career. Jung observed that what we resist most strongly in ourselves often becomes our fate. The very qualities we try hardest to avoid become the source of our greatest difficulties. This isn't cosmic punishment. It's the psyche's attempt to restore balance. The unconscious is constantly working to bring consciousness to what has been rejected, and if we don't voluntarily face our shadow, it will force its way into our lives through symptoms, crises, and dramatic events. The psychological consequence of this pattern is that your life becomes punctuated by inexplicable breakdowns, sudden reversals, and situations where you find yourself acting in ways that contradict everything you believe about yourself. The spiritual consequence is that you remain at war with your own nature, expending enormous energy trying to maintain an image that is fundamentally false. Notice the moments when you surprise yourself with your own behavior, when you act in ways that seem completely out of character. These eruptions are not aberrations. They're glimpses of your rejected parts demanding recognition. Instead of being ashamed of these moments, you can use them as doorways to greater self-understanding. The fourth way your rejected parts control your life is through the mechanism of compensation. Jung discovered that the psyche naturally seeks balance, and when we consciously identify too strongly with one side of our nature, the unconscious compensates by constellating the opposite qualities. This creates an internal split where you consciously embody one set of characteristics while unconsciously manifesting their opposites. Consider the phenomenon of the people pleaser who harbors deep resentment. On the surface, this person is agreeable, accommodating, and always willing to help others. They've rejected their assertiveness, their right to say no, their capacity for healthy selfishness. But the unconscious compensates for this one-sided conscious attitude by generating intense feelings of resentment, passive-aggressive behaviors, and sometimes explosive anger. This compensation often manifests in ways that undermine the very image the person is trying to maintain. The people pleaser finds themselves making cutting remarks, forgetting important commitments, or developing mysterious illnesses that prevent them from fulfilling their obligations. Their rejected assertiveness expresses itself indirectly, often causing more damage than direct communication would have. Jung called this the enantiodromia, the tendency for any extreme position to transform into its opposite. The more rigidly we identify with one aspect of our personality, the more forcefully the opposite aspect will emerge from the unconscious. This isn't a flaw in the psyche, it's a regulatory mechanism designed to prevent us from becoming too one-sided and losing touch with our full humanity. The psychological consequence of this compensation pattern is internal conflict and self-sabotage. You find yourself simultaneously pursuing a goal and undermining it, wanting something while pushing it away. The spiritual consequence is a loss of authenticity, as you become identified with a persona that represents only a fraction of your true nature. Pay attention to the ways you might be compensating for conscious attitudes with unconscious behaviors. If you pride yourself on being independent, notice how you might unconsciously seek excessive validation. If you see yourself as rational, observe how emotions might be leaking out in uncontrolled ways. These compensatory patterns are invitations to embrace a more balanced relationship with all aspects of yourself. Before we explore the fifth and most profound way your rejected parts control your life, I want to take a moment to acknowledge something important. If you're finding value in this exploration of Jung's insights into the human psyche, consider subscribing to this channel and sharing this video with someone who might benefit from these ideas. The work of integration that we're discussing isn't meant to be done in isolation. We need community, we need witnesses, and we need the support of others who are committed to the same journey of becoming whole. Your engagement helps create a community of individuals dedicated to conscious evolution and psychological growth. The fifth and most profound way your rejected parts control your life is through what Jung called living your unlived life. This occurs when the aspects of yourself that you've rejected contain not just your darkness, but also your greatest potential, your unique gifts, and your authentic destiny. When you reject parts of yourself, you don't just push away the negative, you also exile the positive qualities that are inextricably linked to those rejected aspects. Consider the story of Marcus, a successful accountant who had always prided himself on being practical, reliable, and financially responsible. From childhood, he had rejected what he saw as the frivolous, creative aspects of his nature. He viewed artists as irresponsible dreamers, and he had systematically eliminated any trace of creativity from his life. He worked long hours, accumulated savings, and built what appeared to be a stable, successful life. But as Marcus approached his 40th birthday, he began experiencing what Jung would recognize as a profound psychological crisis. He felt increasingly empty despite his external success. He was plagued by dreams of vibrant colors and beautiful music. He found himself drawn to art galleries and concerts, experiences that both moved him deeply and filled him with inexplicable sadness. What Marcus was experiencing was the call of his unlived life, the creative aspects of himself that he had rejected, demanding recognition. Jung believed that everyone comes into this world with a unique potential, a specific contribution that only they can make. But often, The very qualities that contain our greatest gifts are also the ones that were criticized, shamed, or discouraged when we were young. So we reject them, along with the potential they contain. We live what Jung called a provisional life, going through the motions of existence while our true destiny remains unlived. The psychological consequence of rejecting your potential is a deep sense of meaninglessness and depression that no external achievement can cure. You may be successful by conventional standards, but you feel hollow inside because you're not living your authentic nature. The spiritual consequence is even more tragic. You miss the opportunity to fulfill your unique purpose, to contribute the gifts that only you can bring to the world. When you notice yourself having a strong reaction to someone, instead of immediately dismissing them or trying to change them, ask yourself, what quality in this person am I rejecting in myself? When you find yourself repeatedly attracted to problematic situations or people, explore what aspect of your shadow might be seeking expression. When you experience unexpected emotional eruptions, investigate what rejected part of yourself might be trying to get your attention. The work of integration also requires what Jung called active imagination, a process of dialoguing with the different parts of your psyche. You can imagine conversations with the aspects of yourself you've rejected, asking them what they need, what gifts they bring, and how they can be expressed in healthy ways. This isn't about becoming someone else, it's about becoming more fully yourself. As you begin to integrate your rejected parts, you'll notice profound changes in your life. The people who used to trigger you may lose their power over you, not because they've changed, but because you're no longer projecting your shadow onto them. You may find yourself attracted to different types of relationships, ones that support your wholeness rather than enabling your unconscious patterns. Your creative expression may shift as you access parts of yourself that were previously unavailable. You might discover talents and interests that you never knew you had, or you might find new ways to express old passions that you had abandoned. The energy that was previously tied up in repression and projection becomes available for conscious creation and authentic self-expression. Perhaps most importantly, you'll begin to experience what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold paradox and complexity without needing to resolve everything into simple categories of good and bad. You'll develop a more nuanced understanding of yourself and others, recognizing that everyone contains multitudes and that our shadows often hide our greatest treasures. The journey of integration is not a destination, but a lifelong process. There will always be new aspects of yourself to discover, new shadows to illuminate, new potentials to integrate. This is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. Each time you choose integration over rejection, consciousness over unconsciousness, you contribute not only to your own wholeness, but to the healing of the collective human psyche. Jung believed that the work of individuation is not just personal, it's a service to humanity. When you integrate your shadow, you stop projecting it onto others. When you live your authentic nature, you give others permission to do the same. When you embrace your full humanity, including the parts you'd rather deny, you become a bridge between the conscious and unconscious worlds. As we conclude this exploration, I invite you to reflect on your own life with new eyes. Where might your rejected parts be pulling the strings? What patterns keep repeating that could be messages from your shadow? What aspects of yourself have you been running from that might actually contain the keys to your liberation? The path forward is not about perfection or elimination of difficulties. It's about consciousness, about bringing light to the hidden corners of your psyche where your rejected parts have been waiting in exile. It's about recognizing that you are more vast and complex than any image you've tried to maintain, and that your wholeness includes everything you've tried to push away. Your rejected parts are not your enemies. They are the prodigal children of your soul, carrying gifts that can only be accessed through the courage to welcome them home. The very aspects of yourself that you fought against may be the ones that hold your greatest potential for growth, creativity, and authentic contribution to the world. In embracing this work, you're not just healing yourself, you're participating in the evolution of human consciousness. Every person who chooses integration over fragmentation, wholeness over perfection, contributes to a world where all aspects of human nature can be acknowledged and transformed rather than rejected and projected.